No one believed it was possible. When Ibrahim Traoré announced that all foreign mining operations in Africa would be shut down, the world froze. European giants who had made billions from Africa's soil were left stunned. And what happened? Next changed global power forever. The morning in Ouagadougou began quietly, but by evening, history had shifted forever. Cameras clicked, microphones buzzed, and the world's press leaned forward as Ibrahim Traoré, dressed in his military uniform, stepped onto the stage of the National Press Hall. His eyes scanned the room, calm but unshakable, and then his voice rang out with words that struck harder than bullets. From this day forward, no foreign company will mine in Africa without the people's permission. Our resources belong to us, not to outsiders. For a moment, the hall froze in silence. Journalists exchanged stunned glances, pens paused in midair, and even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to vanish. In that instant, the weight of centuries of exploitation seemed to crack. For decades, Africa's gold, diamonds, oil, and rare earths had been shipped overseas to enrich others while his own people remained in poverty. But Traoré was declaring an end to that story, ripping up contracts that had allowed European giants to profit while villages near the mines lived without electricity or clean water. His words carried more than anger. They carried dignity, hope, and a fierce call for justice. International reporters rushed to send out headlines. Africa blocks foreign mining. Lit up television screens in London, Paris, and New York. Within minutes, social media exploded with videos of Traoré's declaration. Hashtags like #hash Africa for Africans *, and #hash DRAO or #bold move climbing into global trends. In Ouagadougou, ordinary people crowded around radios and TVs, some cheering, others in tears, realizing they were living through a moment their grandparents had only dreamed of. It was not just an announcement, it was a thunderclap across the world, a signal that Africa had found its voice, and this time it refused to be silenced. The moment Traoré's words reached Europe, boardrooms that once felt untouchable erupted. In panic, in Paris, executives of the largest mining conglomerates gathered in emergency meetings, their faces pale as live broadcasts replayed Traoré's declaration. In London, financial analysts scrambled to calculate the losses as billions of dollars tied to African mines suddenly hung in uncertainty. Stock tickers flashed red, investors pulled out overnight. As whispers filled the corridors of power, how could a single leader from one of Africa's poorest nations threaten the wealth of entire empires? Newspapers that had once ignored Burkina Faso plastered Traoré's image across their front pages, labeling him everything from a reckless populist to the man rewriting Africa's destiny. But behind the angry headlines was something far more dangerous: fear. For decades, European powers had relied on Africa's resources to fuel their industries, build their cities, and secure their global dominance. Now, one young soldier in a green beret was calling that system to an end. Social media in Europe buzzed with shock. While some citizens supported Africa's right to its own wealth, others raged about the energy crisis that might follow. Television anchors debated, in heated tones, whether Traoré had just thrown the world into a new era of resource wars. But in Africa, the mood was entirely different. In Dakar, Accra, and Lagos, streets erupted with joy, horns blaring, flags waving, as people declared that finally someone had stood up against the giants. African youth filled TikTok and Twitter, with memes of Traoré slamming his hand on the podium, his words edited with thunderclaps and flames. To them, he wasn't just a president, he was a warrior, and while Europe trembled, Africa celebrated. The balance of power was shifting, and the world was only beginning to feel the tremor. As Europe reeled, Africa rose with a roar. From the bustling streets of Lagos to the crowded markets of Nairobi, Ibrahim Traoré's words spread like wildfire, igniting a pride that had been buried under centuries of silence. In Ghana, students painted murals of Traoré in his military uniform, fists raised high, with the bold words, *Africa for Africans, * in South Africa. Union workers rallied in front of Parliament, chanting that no foreign powers should touch African soil without the people's consent. In Mali, Senegal, and Guinea, leaders who had once walked carefully on the world stage now echoed Traoré's call, declaring that their nations too would revisit contracts signed in the shadows of colonial power. Social media platforms pulsed with energy. Hashtags like *hash Africa United * and *hash DRAO or #effect trending across continents. Young Africans filmed themselves tearing up foreign mining ads, declaring in powerful unison, asterisk our future, our resources, our rules. Asterisk even elders who had once doubted the new wave of leadership sat by their radios, tears in their eyes, whispering that they never thought they'd see this day. For the first time, Africa wasn't waiting for Europe's approval. It was writing its own chapter, loud and unapologetic. In Ouagadougou, crowds filled the streets in celebration, singing traditional songs mixed with modern chants, soldiers standing side by side with civilians, declaring that their sacrifice had meaning again. The air vibrated with hope, but also with defiance, because everyone knew the West would not take this humiliation quietly. Yet for that moment, Africa stood taller than ever before, united by one man's voice and the thunderous echo of a continent finally reclaiming its dignity. Asterisk in Washington, Paris, and Brussels, the atmosphere turned ice cold as news of Africa's defiance spread. Closed-door meetings stretched late into the night, diplomats whispering urgently, military advisors sliding maps across polished tables, and corporate lobbyists demanding immediate action. In Paris, a furious French minister slammed his fist against the table, vowing that France would not lose its grip on Africa's gold, uranium, and oil. In Washington, think tanks warned that if Africa truly united under Traore's call, the balance of global power would tilt toward a new world order, one where Western control was no longer guaranteed. Proposals for sanctions were drawn up overnight, freezing aid, cutting trade, and threatening military interventions masked as peacekeeping. European newspapers, echoing the fear of their governments, warned citizens of rising fuel costs, blackouts, and economic collapse if African resources slipped out of reach. Television pundits shouted over each other, calling Traore dangerous, reckless, even a threat to world stability. But behind the insults lay something raw and undeniable: fear. For the first time in generations, Africa was not begging, it was refusing. Intelligence briefings painted a grim picture: foreign companies losing billions, African leaders uniting in secret talks, and public opinion across the continent hardened like steel. We must break this momentum before it spreads, one Western general warned, his words chilling the room. Plans for covert pressure, propaganda campaigns, and diplomatic isolation began to take shape. Yet even as the West plotted its counterattack, a sense of unease lingered. They had underestimated Ibrahim Traoré once before, and the consequences had stunned the world. If they miscalculated again, it wouldn't just be profits they would lose. It could be their centuries-old dominance, asterisk as Western leaders drafted sanctions and threats. Ibrahim Traoré stood once more before the cameras in Ouagadougou, his military uniform gleaming under the hot African sun. The crowd before him stretched endlessly, flags waving, drums echoing, chants of unity shaking the ground. With calm but unshakable defiance, he declared that Africa was no longer a marketplace for foreign greed, but a continent reclaiming its soul. If you cut your aid, he said, his voice booming through the air, we will stand on our soil and grow stronger. If you close your markets, we will trade with each other. If you threaten us, we will not bow. We will rise. The people erupted in thunderous applause, tears streaming down faces young and old, their voices merging into one unstoppable roar. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, radios carried his words, and African leaders echoed his pledge, declaring a united front against foreign exploitation. Across the ocean, Western governments watched in alarm as their threats dissolved into symbols of weakness. Their sanctions met not with submission, but with solidarity. Social media blazed with images of African farmers, miners, and students, standing proudly beneath murals of Traoré, their captions declaring, asterisk our resources, our future, our freedom. Asterisk what began as one man's defiance had become a continent's revolution, a tidal wave no longer possible to contain. And as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the skies of Ouagadougou in gold and crimson, the people raised their fists in unison. For the first time in centuries, Africa's destiny was no longer written in foreign capitals. It was written here, on African soil, by African hands, under African skies. The world had been warned. A new dawn had begun. Asterisk if the story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Asterisk subscribe to Faso Histories for more powerful stories that reveal the truth behind global events.